Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher. Let's choo-choo along with ideas and thoughts about what we hope to see in like a month's time when BlizzCon finally drops on us, and we'll get all sorts of juicy info and hopefully some alpha dates and all that kind of good stuff. You guys responded well to the raids and dungeons. Lots of discussion there. Really amazing to see some of the ideas you guys had on top of the stuff I had. So today we're going to talk about the world that we're going into, because the world's very important. Draenor, I think the problem with the world that maybe needs addressing is a couple of things. One is the mindset. Now that's the most difficult to change, right? We saw lots of people calling like Warlords of Draenor zones linear, which boggles my head, because after you did the very, very first like 3 quests where it was like, okay, choose your fucking thingy. Alright, here's your base. Here's 6 different locations that you can go to, and you can do them in any order you want. And we've done the experience in such a way that you definitely won't have to do them all. So you can come back and do them at any time you want. They're not linear. It's not like go here, or go here, like we had in sort of TBC, which was like, go here, okay, finish, good, next quest, over here, go there, and then it was very, very linear. WoD was very much against that, but still people were like, I think the mindset in WoW, probably a lot of MMOs, is cap. I've got to cap ASA fucking P, I've got to get it done. In fact, we even got different, entirely different zone quest lines and story, depending on what you picked. I don't know if people know that, because you can go back and change it and get an entirely different quest line in a lot of the zones. So, mindset, that's not easy. That's not easy. I think what I'd like to see, first of all, before we get into more detailed stuff, is the story being told better. And this was a huge fault in WoD, is the story wasn't told very well, because we had this entire thing where it's like, we're going back in time, but not really. We're kind of going into a different dimension because we can't affect the current timeline. But one of the big things is that Warlords of Draenor's story was based on the idea that the threat of the Iron Horde, this thing that we were going back to stop and prevent, we were doing this because it presented a very, very real and current threat to our normal timeline, where we actually were at the end of Mr. Pandaria. It was like, this is where the threat is. But Blizzard never, ever made that clear, because they basically just said, go to Draenor. Okay, and we're back in time now. That's cool. But the reason you're here, the exciting thing, the reason this is so important is because there's huge problems being caused in our timeline. But we never saw any of that. We never really had to leave Draenor for anything at all. We never had to go back to the shrine, which was really poor storytelling on their part to not expand on the idea that this is actually pouring into our Azeroth as we know it and love it of today, and we need to deal with this situation back in the past. So whatever the story ultimately ends up being in Legion, with Illidan and Gul'dan, which is no doubt going to get smoked very, very quickly as soon as that expansion starts. He might even be a 5-man boss at this point. He's going to get his ass kicked. That poor lad is getting a kicking. I hope they tell it in a way that makes sense, so it's not like, oh, you're in Legion now, this is Legion. We have this enormous world. We have this huge world, and often complaints are made is that, well, yeah, but as soon as I out-level it, I have no reason whatsoever to ever go back there, unless I'm doing something crazy like leveling mining, which I believe you can actually 100% level now in a city. I haven't tried it myself, but I'm pretty sure you can do that via smelting. So I hope they find ways to maybe give us some reason to go into this enormous landscape that we have access to and always have access to, but have no reason to go there unless we're pet battling or archaeologing or something like that. Something really like, oh god, I have to go fly down to there. Give us a reason to go there, make things happen. And on that side, one of the big things I'm hoping for, and I believe we can find a way to put boots on the ground in our zones in Legion that aren't just for leveling. It failed in WoD. There's no doubt about that, because we got trapped and ensnared within the garrison and our main city, and that was about it. And I just want to get boots on the ground. So how are we going to do that? Because we're not just going to say, I want that, but no reason. I think the first thing we have to look at is, why do we need to geographically segregate people? Why do we need to do that on such a regular basis? And by that I mean, as soon as you hit level cap, yes, there are new areas to go to, but they're so locked off from absolutely anything else. Some of the greatest moments I've had in WoW is stumbling across stuff. Like, oh shit, what's going on there? Where are they going? And we can look at zones like Silithus where suddenly you'd see a raid pouring across the landscape because they're going to go and do the Thunderen. They're going to go and do Thunderen. They're going to do things like that. And you wander through Silithus when it got revamped and suddenly you can see a 20-man raid. It's like, what are those guys up to? I'm here just like level 55 or whatever. I'm just getting on with my gangster quests and suddenly I see this 20-man raid of epic geared people and oh shit, what are they fighting there? I said in the Dungeons and Raids video that you should be able to summon things in the outside of the world via things you can work on outside of raiding, which can either contribute to raiding or they can contribute to your personal progression. All these kind of things are very cool. Why did the invasions have to take place in the garrison? You know what I mean? Where it was locked off from everybody. Why didn't... Because it's just easy to get things to spawn there. Can we not just do that in the open world? Can we not get people who are like, oh, I've just bought Legion? And you'd be surprised. You would always be surprised at how many new players WoW attracts. Or people who are returning. People come back, they're like, okay, I'm going to try Legion, this seems pretty cool. And they're so noobish at the game. If you leave for a couple expansions, my god, you come back and it's like, what the fuck is even going on in the game anymore? And they're wandering through, they're probably leveling slower than those of us who geared up and raided or did whatever in Warlords of Draenor, and they suddenly see all the top level guys are out in the world. They're out in the middle of the world and they're doing interesting things. And you're like, shit, I can't go near there, I'm going to get killed. And I would certainly be looking to tweak, I think is probably the word, tweak the idea of I can cast a dot on something and then run the fuck away and I'll still get loot from it. I mean, that system to me just blows my fucking head. It's crazy. And just have people doing stuff in the world. If we look at the Apexis dailies, they were there and they were big pieces of content, but my god, were they hidden away. If you look at Frostfire Ridge, it was totally locked behind a mountain. I mean, yes, you could theoretically ride into there as a low level, but you wouldn't. One, it's out of the way on its own. You look at Darktide Roost down in Shadowmoon Valley, it's like over a river, you got to fly there, or you get the special mount from your garrison to get there. And all these areas are really locked away. And I never liked the idea that this had to happen. Why does the levelers need their own little area, and the level 100 guys need, or the 110 as it will need their own little area? Why can't we intersperse that to give an idea of what's to come? Or this is a cool thing. How does that happen? Get people asking questions. What are you guys doing? How do I take part in that? Why are you doing it? All this kind of questions and interesting stuff. I mean, even we can look at Mr. Pandaria and look at the world boss, and you knew the Shah of... I'm going to get it wrong, I know I am. It was the one that was in the zone outside the shrine. The big Shah of Fear, Shah of Anger, Shah of whatever. But once you saw he was up there and floating around, I remember coming into that zone in the early days on the beta, and I was in Method at the time, and it was like, shit, the Shah's up, and saying guild chat, the Shah's up, and get a raid together. But the first thing I saw in the distance was this monolithic giant creature, and I'm like, what the fuck? I think WoD did a reasonable job on world bosses, but I think we could do better. And I think that's always the idea. We could do better than this. Rather than... Because with the pre-made group finder, what I tend to find is people go there immediately. So if you look at Kazakh, you only go there for like 10 minutes. Your pre-made group finder, you find one who's got one ready, you head to the zone, boom, you phase into the area that's got it, you kill it, you disappear, you'll never go there again, rather than having something that's roaming around and big, and certainly let's increase the health. I'm not saying they should be more difficult by any means, because you don't want to really wipe on this stuff, especially if it's like low-level gear, or stuff that's supposed to prop you up. It's generally designed for people who aren't raiding, so you kind of want a lower item level than that, and you kind of want to make it so a disorganized pug can get the job done. But make it so they spawn less but have higher health, so people can stumble across them and can race to them, which was a very big thing if you look at, say... We lost world bosses for a long time, so I'm going to have to... I'm not being roasted here, I'm just going to give some examples of things like Malygos in Ashara is... He had so much health that even a 40-man raid was going to take a while to kill him, unless they severely outgeared him, in which case they probably wouldn't be doing it, is that you could race to Ashara from Ogrimmar. You could race there and get involved in the fight and make a little raid group and do all that kind of stuff. And world bosses were kind of an event. And world bosses aren't really an event now. It's the guy who drops my fell crystals or whatever the fuck they're called. You know what I mean? And that's really boring. That's really boring because they're non-events. It should be an event. It should be a big event. It should be scary. It should be interesting. And I'm just hoping for interest. One of the big things we could take away from the Raids and Dungeons video is people just want cooler moments rather than practicality. Practicality is all very well and good up to a point, but sacrificing coolness to get practicality is kind of a bummer because it's just less interesting, it's less involved. And I would love to see, I'd love them to just push the merging of the two worlds between the cap players and the leveling players, and have things going on in these zones instead of these zones just entirely going to waste unless you're going to fly down, kill the world boss, and then disappear again. And for the rest of it, that entire zone is just like a barren wasteland with no activity, no interest. Even in WoD, it's so small. The actual constant of WoD is very, very small, but people are so heavily populated in just two little spots, rather than the world itself going to any form of use. And even though there are people there, then they may be doing their Apex's dailies, they're just segregated away, so you never see them. In fact, the flight points take you actively away from them. If you're flying over, you certainly don't pass through, instead of just mixing and matching and creating areas. Not to say not having high-level areas isn't good. Again, if we can look at things like where the elementals, if you were farming elementals for crafting and stuff, they were kind of pushed away because you don't want levelers, you know, running into constant streams of high-level mobs. That's not that fun. But allowing people to create a high-level mob that they intend to fight, and certainly is in some way chained, so it can't just be dragged and we have Kazakh installment and all that kind of stuff. But based on the expense of the reagents, unlikely to happen anyway. Those are the kind of things I want to see in the world. I want to see the story told better, and not parts of it missed out or not made clear. I mean, even if we had some missions or objectives that involved, there was no reason in WoD not to use parts of Mists of Pandaria, to use parts of Azeroth, to make us go back there and say, shit, the Iron Horde's causing fucking trouble here. This zone has been sacked. You can imagine if you were seeing over the course of Warlords of Draenor, just imagine for a moment, that various areas were being sacked by the Iron Horde, and the landscape was changing over the course of Warlords of Draenor, and creating issues there that you had to deal with. That would have been far more interesting, but that entire huge portion of the story was never ever explained to us. So whatever the final story is in Legion, I would love that to be expanded upon, and I'd love the story, the zone itself, to be relevant throughout the entire content, rather than just for your leveling experience, which most people rush through, and get that worked back in, and create interest for new players. Those are my ideas for the world. That's what I want to see. What do you want to see? All right, guys. Bye-bye.